Hi guys, and welcome to New Vocations Virtual Tour Wednesdays. My name is Sarah Coleman, and this is Leandra Cooper, which everybody knows because she's famous. But we're going to talk to you guys a little bit about the transitional training that the horses get once they come over here. This is the training side of our Lexington, Kentucky facility. I know you all got to see some of the rehab side. I think that was last week. But I'm going to ask Leandra some questions, and she's going to kind of explain the process that the horses go through. We're talking specifically about horses that retire from the track sound, so they can come immediately over to our training side, which is one of the barns that we're in now. So Leandra, one of the questions that I always get when I do our tours is, what is the hardest thing that you do with these horses to transition them? And I typically say, getting some of them used to turnout. Is that inappropriate?
Sure, yeah. A lot of times the horses have not been in a turnout where they're able to kind of be at liberty and themselves in a bigger space, uncontrolled. So that can be a point of transition that is more difficult because we want to ease them into it so they don't get too excited and too overstimulated and cause themselves harm. So we tend to start them in our round pens, which Erica can show you. It's raining out right now, so we'll stay in the comfort of our barn, but there they are. There are 4 of them, and they're good size. What's great about those is that we can actually use them for things like lunging and at liberty work too, so they serve dual purpose. But a lot of times horses who we know have just come directly from the track and didn't have any layup time or time where they had already experienced turnout will start there. It's a smaller space, so they can't really get running, they can't pick up speed, and hopefully can't find a way to get overexcited and hurt themselves. So we give them about a week in the round pen, so they'll be turned out there for about a half a day and come back in, and they're at that point just getting used to our schedule, the environment, the other horses, the transition to our feed. So there's a lot of periods of adjustment right there that are happening. But after that week is when we start them in our training program in a more progressive way.
Got it. So I know that, we have multiple facilities in different locations, and each trainer has kind of their own process that they go through when getting the horses ready to go up for adoption. But Leandra, do you typically lunge your horses before you get on them?
A lot of times we will. There are some horses, I would say, taking a step back, that we customize every horse's training. So it's really a tailored program for each horse as an individual. So as they're orienting to our process, we're trying to assess what's going to work best for them. There certainly are some horses who might just do better when they're just started back into an under saddle routine, but for most of them, I would say we do start them lunging, and for most of them, they have not lunged before. So it's a simple concept. They're on a long line and they're going in a circle around you, but you'll be surprised maybe by how hard a circle can be. And so oftentimes we're starting them lunging in the round pen too, because if we were to start training them in a bigger space, we might have our arms yanked out of their sockets. But that's a great way for us to look at their movement without a rider, kind of unbridled and unadulterated in that sense. So we're just, again, looking at how they move, seeing more of their personality, and that's going to help us to build up to the rest of the under saddle work.
That's awesome. So can you give people, these horses are used to going out of their stalls to work in some fashion 6 days a week, 7 days a week. Could you talk to us a little bit about how many days a week you generally ride them when they first come in? How long is that first ride? Do you expose them to everything all at once, or do you take it kind of slow?
It's a slower process, and some pick up on it really quickly and others need more time. So in that same sense, we're always customizing it and adjusting as needed. But for our first rides, they're usually short and sweet. So the more we can set the foundation for them to have a happy experience where they're not stressed, they don't feel like they're being overtaxed of our asks, then the better off you're going to be in sequential rides where you can build up time and ask a little bit more of them. And of course there are exceptions, like some horses you get on and they feel like they've been doing it forever, but as a general rule, we just start them out nice and easy and then build them up in both exposure and time under saddle and what we're asking of them. But it also will help us to assess like their stress response too.
Nice.
So you can see their threshold for different kinds of work. You can kind of see where their boundaries are, what they know, what they don't know, so that we can make a plan to bridge, make a connection between what they don't know and what they do know, and hopefully teach them the new buttons of whatever discipline they'll go into. But we're really just trying to lay that foundation so that they are happy in work, they enjoy what they're doing, and are physically and mentally ready for the next steps, and then just ease them up into that.
Which makes total sense. So as you guys know, I'm sure if you're watching this, we have been lucky enough that we've been adopting horses out like gangbusters, all of our locations. But can you talk a little bit about, I know that a lot of our viewers have seen the horses go out on the trails and things like that. Do the horses receive more training the longer they're here? Or are the trails something you always take the horses on? How does that work?
Yeah, and actually that reminds me of one of your last questions for how frequently we work, so I'll touch on that. I would say when a horse is in a full routine, they're really just working like every other day. Every once in a while you'll have a horse who needs to be worked more, and quite a few of them are happy to just have like 1 or 2 days a week, and again, that's going to depend on their physical and mental readiness for that. But there are some, especially like Indian Companion here has been with us a little bit of a longer time. Generally our average is 40 to 60 days, and he's been here a little longer, and he needed to have time to just feel better because he came and had ulcers, which we treated completely, so it's no longer an issue for him. But we wanted to make sure that he was really physically ready to feel good and work well, so it just required a little extra time. But with one like him, and he is up on our website and available for adoption still, but he was here, he's obviously fully integrated into our routine at this point, is a great senior member of our trainee. So he actually is helping newer horses transition to the routine now too, and kind of letting them know everything's okay. But we've taken him on trail rides. Some other horses that maybe are going to be more limited, or just we want to show them with a little bit more versatility, or maybe we just want to see how they're going to react on the trails. We will certainly try to introduce them to new things, but it always kind of depends on who else is in the barn too. Right. So we want to have like a good solid buddy who's going to be the anchor in case something does happen, and that, you never know what you're going to encounter on the trails. So it always kind of depends on who we have that's ready to do that, but we're always trying to expose them to new things so that they'll be as prepared as possible. But certainly, to address your question, when they're here for longer, they're getting different levels of training for whatever we think that they will want to do and can do. But they'll get a little bit more of the refined training, not like a little more than just the bare basics. Because a lot of them, they're getting adopted so quickly that we're just trying to like give them a good foundation and then put them into experience-capable homes. But for some of them, we're able to work with them more on that like refined movement. So collection and rhythm and pace, or trail rides, and all those different sort of things.
So this does lead me to another question. We see a lot on our social media, and we also get in our tours the question of, how do you know which discipline a horse would prefer to do? And really, I mean, to me, that really says a lot for our trainers, who are able to say with just a couple rides, we feel this horse is brave, we think he'd enjoy being an eventer, or he's pretty brave on the trail, or that kind of thing. How do you determine, or is it always like, he enjoys everything, this is what we think he would excel at?
Some horses just, what's tricky is we're looking at them generally from a very young age. So most of our trainees, like Indian Companion here is 10, so he is an exception. But most of them are very young, so 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 years old. We have fewer older ones. Most of them are quite young. So when we're just laying the foundation, we're going off of a really preliminary feel.
Right.
So things like conformation, of course, are going to play into what we think that they will do, because we're thinking about longevity. So something like how they're built and what they're structurally kind of prepared to do, and considering any previous injuries, of course, those are going to play into it. But I would say more so than anything else, the personality and the movement is what we're looking at. And we're really lucky to have such a skillful group of riders, not just here, but at our remote facilities as well. We have people coming from lots of different backgrounds who have competed or ridden or trained in all different disciplines, so they have a sense of what the right feel is and what the capability is, and so they can sort of project into the future and say, I think this horse will be a good prospect for this or that, and that's going to play a huge role, and it is that like mentality. So like you said, if we have a horse who's really brave or one who's not so brave, that's going to be something, obviously those things can be worked on and trained. If they're not brave, they're babies, so with more time and experience and confidence, then hopefully they will become more brave. But we're always trying to be a little bit conservative, but give them the best possible forecasts for their future. But definitely that, again, the physical and mental aspects of it both are combined there with our experience as riders and trainers to try to give a good outlook, but we don't want to also create too much of a bias.
Right.
So sometimes we leave it a little bit open, and some horses just seem like they could go in lots of different directions. And I think like any experienced horse person knows that like conformation alone cannot tell you what the horse is going to be able to do. So we're looking at a ton of different variables and just try to put it out there. And ultimately, we're just trying to find the right person whose goals and whose personality matches that of the horse, and then hopefully they together will find something that they want to do and can do in a successful way.
So the one thing that really struck me is that, and we have said this all the time, so let's say the average day is 45 to 60 days.
Yeah.
So do you feel it's appropriate to say that horses that are adopted from training, walk, trot, canter, stop, and steer? Like, is that, it's generally, like, if they went out the door 3 rides in, you could at least say, I can confidently say what these horses can do, walk, trot, canter, stop, and steer.
Yeah,
and then the longer they're here, they get more education.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I think that is what we have defined as the standard. So no matter which facility the horse is coming from, as long as they're physically able to do those things, then that's the standard that we go by for the horse should be able to do those things in a relaxed and safe way before they're adoptable. And that might be like one ride in and you're like, all right, well, this seems like he's pretty ready, or you might need to work a little bit longer on that. But that's what we've defined as kind of our universal standard. Here in Lexington, we have multiple things, obstacles and such in our ring, so like we almost always show them the ground pole on the first day and just see what they think.
Right.
Because it's like, even if you don't go over it, you kind of get a sense of what they think of it. So we're always trying to test them in little sort of ways, just again to figure out their personality, because that's what's going to make a huge component of the decision for who they are matched best with. But certainly the walk, trot, canter, stop, and steer are your foundation pieces there. Yeah.
And get on from a mounting block, right?
Ideally, yeah.
Yes, perfect. So you did say one other thing that I would assume that we most likely will get a question on. When you had mentioned that he had ulcers, can you talk a little bit about how you knew that he was uncomfortable and knew to even look to see if he had ulcers?
Yeah, absolutely. So Indian Companion here, he had kind of what we would call a dull coat. So there wasn't a lot of shine to it, and we also had gotten him in the fall and the winter, and that can be a hard time to assess because they're kind of fuzzy and dull anyway. So really enjoying this. But he just wasn't gaining weight very well. He was anxious. He had the textbook symptoms of ulcers, and studies have shown more and more recently that many of the horses who have a rigorous lifestyle, so certainly racehorses fall into that category because they're not getting lots of turnout time, they have a really hard job, and that can result in them sort of harboring this stress in different sort of ways. But he just he wasn't gaining weight well. His coat was kind of dull, and he just had sort of nervous behaviors. But we were really fortunate to have the opportunity to work with Hagyard, one of the local veterinary clinics. They were doing a study to look at one of their products, Reline. They had done some modifications to their composition of it, so their kind of recipe for Reline, and we were able to partner with them and submit some of the horses to be scoped, and Indian Companion here was one that they wanted to treat and rescope so they could see the progress. So we were lucky that we were able to be part of that study and to see the progress along the way, and we're really, really impressed with their results. It's the fastest I've ever seen ulcers resolve, and he had one of the more advanced stages of ulcers. I think part of that just being that he's a little bit older. Don't tell him that though. And he had a longer career there, so it just took him a little bit longer to adjust to the different pace of...
He very clearly has adjusted as he yawns throughout our entire video.
He does not mind being a pleasure horse now at all.
I love it. Well, Leandra, thank you. I know that I don't know if we have any questions on there, but if there are any later on, just put them in the comments and we'll make sure we find them. And Indian Companion is grateful you watched.